Hi, I'm Anastasia, and this is a TOEFL speaking simulation video. Take a look at this question. Now, imagine you have 15 seconds to prepare your response and 45 seconds to answer it. You'll need to provide details and examples, and include at least one reason to support your opinion. You should also sound natural and use some idiomatic expressions. And of course, if your answer is unclear or hard to understand, you could lose points. This is what the TOEFL speaking section looks like today, and this is why students all over the world find it so challenging. From my experience teaching TOEFL both one-on-one and in groups, the speaking section together with the reading section are the two most difficult parts of the test. So today, we'll go through a full TOEFL speaking test together. I want you to get as much value out of it as possible. So please pause the video first and try answering the questions on your own. Then listen to my responses. For each question, I'll give you two sample answers. One that would score around 22 or 23 points on test day, and another that would earn a perfect 30 out of 30. This way, it will be easier for you to see where you stand and what you should and shouldn't do to achieve a high score. And of course, don't forget to share your responses in the comments below so you can learn from each other. Let's begin. The first question is called Independent Speaking, and it tests how fluently you can speak about a general topic with very little time to prepare. You'll have 15 seconds to prepare and 45 seconds to speak. Let's listen to the first answer, which would score 3 out of 4 on test day. For those who don't know, each question in the TOEFL speaking section is scored on a scale from 0 to 4. If you score 3 out of 4 on each question, your total speaking score will be around 22 or 23 points. But if you get 4 out of 4 on all questions, you'll earn a perfect 30. So our first response will be the one that scores 3 out of 4. And by the way, I've designed my 3 out of 4 responses to highlight the most common mistakes students make. So don't be surprised if I focus only on certain negative aspects. We don't want this video to be too long, so I'll draw your attention to the main issues only.
Do you agree or disagree with the following statement? Parents should be involved in the process of helping their children to choose a university. Use specific reasons and details in your response.
Please prepare your answer after the beep. Please begin speaking after the beep.
I think parents should help their children choose a university, but they shouldn't make the final decision for them. Parents usually have more experience, so they can give useful advice about tuition, job opportunities, or the reputation of the school. But sometimes, they don't really understand what their child really wants to study. So in my opinion, parents should support their children, but let them make the final choice. What's good about this response? It has a clear structure. I stated the main idea right away and returned to it at the end. There is good control of grammar and vocabulary. The phrases I used in this response are natural and grammatically correct. For example, parents usually have more experience and they can give useful advice about tuition. The response also features topic-specific vocabulary. The question is about choosing a university, and I used words such as tuition, job opportunities, and the school's reputation. Cohesive devices are used well. This response includes linking words such as but, so, and in my opinion, which help the listener follow the flow of ideas. Finally, the tone is intelligible and natural. My delivery was clear and easy to understand, which is always an important aspect of the TOEFL speaking section. Now, what are the aspects that limit this response to a 3 out of 4 score? First and foremost, it's limited development. I gave my reasons, but there is no concrete example or elaboration. Adding a short story or a personal situation. For example, my friend's parents helped her find a university with a good engineering program would make my argument much stronger. Another issue is that I try to talk about the benefits of both points of view. That parents should help their kids, but also that kids should make their own decisions. It's not a bad approach, but I usually don't recommend my students do that on test day. Since time is limited, it's better to pick one opinion and stick to it so you have time to develop your ideas. Even if it's not what you truly believe, it's fine. For example, you could say that you believe parents should help their children choose a university, give one reason for this opinion, and support it with a short personal story. Another thing is slight repetition. I repeated words such as really and their children several times. It's always better to avoid repeating the same words, especially when you can easily use a synonym or simply rephrase the sentence. For instance, instead of their children, I could have said their kids. And instead of but sometimes they don't really understand what their child really wants to study, I could have said but sometimes parents don't understand what their children want to study. Finally, be careful with minor filler words such as you know. While there is nothing wrong with using it once, if you say it too often in such a short response, it might slightly lower your score. Let's listen to a 4 out of 4 response. I believe that parents should help their children choose a university because they have a lot of experience. Many students choose schools based only on location or popularity, but parents can help them consider more important long-term factors, such as program quality or future career opportunities. I remember how my cousin wanted to attend a private university just because his friends were going there. His parents encouraged him to research public universities with strong business programs, and he ended up saving money while receiving an excellent education. After graduation, he was able to land a well-paying job and is now extremely glad that his parents' involvement helped him to make a more informed and balanced choice. In this answer, we start with a direct and confident opinion, which is exactly what TOEFL raters look for. Then we have a clear and easy-to-understand reason, followed by a detailed and believable example about my cousin. There are also several advanced expressions, such as long-term factors, career opportunities, and balanced choice. Because of the personal story, I was also able to show more grammatical variety by using different tenses. For example, wanted to attend, his friends were going there, and his parents' involvement has allowed him. I also included some idiomatic vocabulary, such as he ended up saving money. So overall, here is what you want to do in question 1 of the TOEFL speaking test. 1. Give a clear opinion. Always choose one point of view and explain it. 2. Provide one clear reason for this opinion. Make it simple and easy to understand. If you're a fast speaker, you can give 2 reasons, but only if you have enough time. 3. Provide a detailed example. It can be a personal story or a clear, specific explanation. From my experience, TOEFL raters love personal stories. 4. Use at least one idiomatic expression. It should sound natural, so my advice is to create a list of 10 to 15 idiomatic expressions and ask ChatGPT to generate practice exercises with them, such as fill in the gap or matching activities. Work with them until you have a strong understanding of each phrase, and then try to use 1 or 2 naturally in your question 1 responses during practice. And of course, work on your pronunciation, intonation, and enunciation. Many people neglect this component, but without clear articulation and natural pronunciation and intonation, you'll never be able to get a high score on the TOEFL speaking test. This applies to every question. If your answers are unclear and the rater cannot understand you, if you mispronounce words frequently, if your stress patterns sound unnatural, then even with perfect grammar and vocabulary, your chances of getting a high score are very limited. By the way, If you'd like to learn the speaking and writing templates that make up half of your answers and can help you boost your score from around 22 or 23 to 25 or 27, click the link below. These templates will help you feel confident and relaxed on test day, and you'll know exactly what to say for each question. Now that we've talked quite a bit about question 1, let's move on to question 2. This is an integrated question based on a campus announcement. You'll first read a short announcement and then listen to a conversation between two people discussing it. After that, you'll need to briefly summarize the announcement and explain the opinion of the speaker who is more active in the conversation. You should also elaborate on the 2 reasons they give to support their opinion.
Read an article from the campus newspaper. You will have 50 seconds to read the article. Begin reading now. Now listen to 2 students discussing the article.
Oh no, did you see this?
Yeah? Why? You don't like the idea?
Not at all.
How come?
Well, the cost for one thing, they're just not being realistic.
Even compared to the price of textbooks?
Well, sure, textbooks aren't cheap, but do you think people are only going to use one device the whole time they're at university? What happens if yours breaks? You have to buy a new one. Or they come out with some fancy new features. Wouldn't you want to get a new one then?
Yeah, I see what you mean. A lot of people would probably want to replace theirs with the latest version.
Right. Maybe even every year, and that can add up.
True. But don't you agree it'll make studying and preparing for classes a lot easier?
I don't think everybody's going to think it's so great.
What do you mean?
Well, it's only helpful if it's easy to use, and, well, this thing is pretty small. It's only about 18 or 20 centimeters tall.
Oh, really? So that means the screen's pretty small.
Right. And I heard that the keypad or control buttons, they're small too. So if you have normal-sized fingers, it's not so easy to select an item or get it to function right. You know, to do stuff like highlighting or underlining.
I hadn't thought of that.
So what good are all those fancy features if it's hard to use them? Besides, I like the old-fashioned way of studying the material, writing notes on the page and underlining or highlighting important sections of the book. I'm more comfortable with that.
Please prepare your answer after the beep. Please begin speaking after the beep.
Let's listen to a 3 out of 4 response first. In the announcement, the university plans to switch to electronic textbooks. The speaker disagrees with this idea and gives 2 reasons to support her opinion. First, she says that if electronic books break down, students will have to buy new ones, which could actually turn out to be even more expensive. Second, the woman adds that the screens of electronic books are very small and don't really help in studying. If students have average-sized fingers, they might find it difficult to work with the text. What's good about this response? It has a clear structure. I introduced both the announcement and the speaker's opinion, then gave 2 separate reasons. That's exactly the right format for this task. Also, my content was accurate. I didn't make any mistakes, and both of my reasons were correct and relevant. 1. Devices breaking, more expensive. 2. Small screens, hard to study effectively. It was also concise and easy to follow. Now, what about the weaknesses? Mostly, it's about limited detail and development. Of course, I mentioned the announcement and the reasons, but I only did it briefly. TOEFL raters expect a bit more explanation and examples. I didn't give the 2 reasons for the change from the reading. That electronic books are supposed to be cheaper and more effective for studying. I also didn't include enough details about the speaker's reasons. For example, I didn't mention that if new features appear, students may want to upgrade to the latest version. I also didn't say that the devices themselves are only about 18 to 20 centimeters long, and that not only their screens, but also their keypads and control buttons are small, which makes it difficult to highlight or underline text. So for question 2, if you want to get a high score, you should write down the main idea and the 2 sub-ideas from the reading. Then give the speaker's opinion, and then add as many details from the conversation as possible, especially if you were aiming for a 4 out of 4. Since I didn't include enough details, my response is too short, and that's another disadvantage. It's only about 25 to 30 seconds long if spoken at a normal pace. A top response usually lasts around 45 to 60 seconds, which gives you enough time to include all the necessary details. And of course, there are a few language and grammar issues. The collocation electronic books is repeated too often. We could replace it with the word devices. In addition, the phrase don't really help in studying sounds okay, but aren't effective for studying is more natural. Now, with all this in mind, let's listen to a 4 out of 4 sample answer. According to the announcement, the university plans to replace traditionally bound textbooks with electronic versions because ebooks cost less and can help students study more efficiently. However, the speaker disagrees with this idea. First, she says that electronic books will actually turn out to be more expensive. If a device breaks down, students will have to buy a new one. Also, when new models or features appear, they'll feel pressure to replace their old devices almost every year. Second, the speaker argues that electronic books aren't as effective for studying. The devices are quite small, only about 18 to 20 centimeters tall. So their screens, keypads, and buttons are tiny. And for students with average-sized fingers, highlighting or underlining text will be difficult. Since it's hard to use all those features, she believes that ebooks won't really improve learning. She even adds that she prefers the old-fashioned way of working with paper textbooks. In this response, I have a clear structure, which is very important for getting a high score. I begin by summarizing the university's plan, and it's 2 reasons: switching to electronic books for cost and efficiency. Then I clearly explain both of the speaker's reasons for disagreeing with the announcement. 1, they're actually more expensive in the long run, and 2, they're not convenient or efficient to use. This response also features varied and precise vocabulary. Finally, my delivery was smooth and clear. A small tip from me. The 2 reasons the speaker gives in the conversation always address the 2 sub-points mentioned in the reading. For example, in this text, the 2 reasons for switching to electronic books were that they are cheaper and more effective for studying. The speaker presented her counter-arguments in exactly the same order. She first talked about the cost, and then discussed the effectiveness of these study aids. If you want your answers on the TOEFL to get the highest score, you should use this to your advantage. When analyzing the reading, you can already predict what the conversation will be about. Then, when summarizing the conversation, start by addressing the first subpoint from the reading and follow with the second one. That's exactly what I did in my response. I said, first, she says that electronic books will actually be more expensive. Second, the speaker argues that electronic books aren't as effective for studying. Now, question 3. In this question, you'll have 30 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds to speak. You'll read an academic text that explains a concept and then listen to a lecture that provides an example or explains that concept in more detail. Let's give it a try.
Read a passage from a biology textbook. You will have 50 seconds to read the passage. Begin reading now. Now listen to a lecture on this topic in a biology class.
Okay, we can see a great example of this with ants. Ants live in large groups called colonies. They normally move together to get to food sources. And sometimes when ants are moving toward a food source, they'll encounter or find an obstacle in their path. So, for instance, let's say a large number of ants are walking on a tree toward some food on a branch. But when they reach the end of the branch they're walking on, there's a wide space between that branch and the next one, the branch with the food on it. Now, none of these ants alone can cross this wide space to get to the other branch with the food. So, how do they solve this problem? Here's how. One ant walks forward until it reaches the end of the branch, and then it automatically holds onto the branch with its back legs. Then it stretches its body forward into the open space. Now, this comes naturally to ants, and it's a simple action. So then the next ant walks to the end of the branch and right across the first ant's body. Then it holds on to the first ant, and then it stretches its body out into the open space, just a little bit closer to the branch with the food on it. Then, one after another, other ants do the same thing, until enough ants connect together to form a bridge between the two branches. Pretty amazing, huh? The connected ants hold this position, allowing the rest of the ants in the group to cross over this bridge of ants to reach the food.
Please prepare your answer after the beep. Please begin speaking after the beep.
Now it's time for a 3 out of 4 response. The reading talks about swarm intelligence, which is when insects work together to do something they can't do alone. The professor gives an example about ants that live in groups and go to find food together. When they're walking on a tree and there is a space between two branches, one ant stretches its body to reach the other side, and then the other ants walk on it and do the same. In the end, they make a kind of bridge to get to the food. So this shows that insects can cooperate with each other. This answer correctly includes the main idea and the example from the lecture, and the information is organized in a logical, easy-to-follow way. In addition, the vocabulary and grammar are mostly accurate. However, there are a couple of things that would make this answer receive a 3 rather than a 4. First of all, you've probably noticed that the vocabulary in this response is somewhat simplified. While there is nothing wrong with using simple words or phrases, if your language sounds too basic throughout your response, it will lower your score. For example, instead of saying, go to find food, I could have said, cooperate to find food, or move together to find food. Similarly, work together to do something could be replaced with work together to accomplish or achieve tasks. The second weakness is that many sentences in this response are short and repetitive. In this task, it's better to create longer, more connected sentences that focus on the final outcome, rather than describing each step separately. For instance, instead of saying, in the end, they make a kind of bridge to get to the food. So, this shows that insects can cooperate with each other. You could say, in the end, they make a kind of bridge to get to the food, which shows that insects can cooperate with each other. We usually pause between sentences, which is natural. But when time is limited, longer sentences help you reduce unnecessary pauses and include more information. Finally, in this response, my tone was rather flat, which would also lower my delivery score. What's important to remember for this task is that you might feel overwhelmed by the amount of information in the lecture. So my suggestion is to break your summary into 3 steps. First, Introduce the context. Who, where, and when. For example, in this lecture, ants live in large colonies and move in groups to find food. Then, add details that answer the questions, what's happening and how does it happen? For instance, when ants move up a tree toward food, they might encounter a gap between the branches. One ant walks to the end of the branch, holds it with its back legs, and stretches its body, and the other ants do the same. Finally, ask yourself, so what? What conclusion can I make from this? This part should answer the question, what's the final outcome? For example, by repeating this process, the ants form a kind of bridge that allows the rest of the colony to cross and reach the food. That's it. Just 3 main parts: the introduction of the context, the details, and the final outcome. And of course, never try to include every detail you hear. You'll run out of time. I'll now give you 2 examples of 4 out of 4 responses. And you'll see that while both would receive the highest score, the second one is noticeably shorter. That's because it doesn't try to tell the story step by step, but instead focuses on the most essential details, which makes it much easier to produce. Response 1. The reading passage explains the concept of swarm intelligence, which refers to complex behavior that allows groups of insects to accomplish tasks they couldn't manage alone. In the lecture, the professor gives an example of ants that live in colonies and usually cooperate to find food. When ants climbing a tree come across a gap between 2 branches, they can't cross it individually. However, they work together to solve the problem. One ant holds onto the branch with its back legs and stretches its body forward, and the next ant walks onto it and does the same. By repeating this process, they form a kind of bridge that lets the rest of the colony cross and reach the food. This example clearly demonstrates swarm intelligence, since the ants coordinate their actions to achieve a common goal. Response 2. The reading passage discusses swarm intelligence, which is a complex behavior that allows large groups of insects to accomplish tasks they couldn't manage on their own. In the lecture, the professor explains this concept with an example of ants that live in colonies and move together to find food. When ants climbing a tree encounter a gap between 2 branches, they can't cross it individually, but they cooperate to form a living bridge. What usually happens is that one ant holds onto the branch with its back legs and stretches its body forward. Then another ant walks onto it and does the same, followed by others. Eventually, they create a bridge that allows the rest of the colony to cross and reach the food. Your job is to produce a response similar to answer number 2, without unnecessary detail, but clear and to the point. And remember to use at least some slightly more advanced language, such as cooperate, accomplish tasks, or work collectively. If you want to answer TOEFL speaking questions without hesitation, panic, or mistakes, click the link below and enroll in our TOEFL course. We'll teach you how to take effective notes, speak confidently, and most importantly, use high-scoring templates for each question to boost your score. You'll get access to our TOEFL app, where you can take practice tests, track your progress, and since we're official ETS partners, you'll also receive a promo code for a 5% discount on your TOEFL test. For those of you who have been struggling with the TOEFL for a long time and want personalized feedback, you can choose the Pro package and schedule a consultation with me. I'll evaluate your writing and speaking responses and explain exactly what you need to change to improve your score. Finally, the last question is question 4, the academic lecture. In this task, you'll have 20 seconds to prepare and 60 seconds to speak. You won't read any text this time. You'll just listen to a lecture. It usually begins with the professor explaining a topic or concept followed by 2 examples that illustrate it. For instance, it might be about 2 types of animals, 2 adaptation strategies, or 2 ways something happens. Your job is to listen carefully, take notes, and then summarize the lecture.
Listen to part of a lecture in a history class.
So, most cities of the ancient world tended to be small, often limited to the banks of a river. They had very little means to expand. These old cities couldn't really cross natural barriers like rivers, or be located very far from water sources. But Roman cities, on the other hand, grew much larger. How did this happen? Well, for one thing, the Romans had more advanced technology. Let's look at a couple of Roman developments that allowed their cities to expand. One development that allowed Roman cities to grow was their advanced building materials. The Romans developed a special kind of concrete, a building material that would harden underwater. And this concrete made new kinds of structures possible. Take their bridges, for example. Because of this special concrete, they could build better bridges, bridges that could go across wide rivers, bridges that were big enough to transport equipment and materials with wagons and carts. So with these strong bridges, Roman cities could grow on both sides of the river, creating larger cities than would have been possible otherwise. Another development that helped Roman cities expand was an improved way to move fresh, clean water. People need access to fresh water, and the Romans created an especially effective way to bring it to them. They built structures called aqueducts. Now, aqueducts are a series of open channels, waterways that stretch from water sources high in the mountains to cities. They were carefully planned and built so that a steady drop in altitude provided a steady flow of water to cities. These aqueducts could move a tremendous amount of water over great distances, and even bring fresh water to places far from rivers. Because of this, people could have clean water for drinking and bathing without being located near a river. So cities were able to grow larger in new locations.
Please prepare your answer after the beep. Please begin speaking after the beep.
Three out of four response. In the lecture, the professor talks about how Roman cities were able to grow. The professor mentions two main reasons. First, the Romans used better building materials, like a special kind of concrete that could harden underwater. And because of this, they built strong bridges across rivers, which helped cities develop on both sides. And second, the Romans created a way to move clean water from mountains to their cities, and they made long structures called aqueducts that carried water for drinking and bathing. Thanks to that, people didn't need to live right next to a river, so more places became good for living. As you might have already noticed, this answer definitely lacks detail. It doesn't mention transporting equipment and materials in wagons and carts, or that aqueducts worked over long distances and provided a steady flow of water. The vocabulary is also quite basic. And more importantly, the speaker wasted valuable time at the beginning by saying, in the lecture, the professor talks about how Roman cities were able to grow. The professor mentions two main reasons. Instead, you could start your response with something like, the lecture is about two, and then add the topic of discussion. In this response, I also included more pauses and hesitations. While it's completely fine to pause occasionally, we're not robots, after all. If you do it too often, your score may go down. Let's listen to a 4 out of 4 response. The lecture is about two developments that allowed Roman cities to expand. The first was the use of advanced building materials, specifically a special kind of concrete that could harden underwater. This innovation made it possible for the Romans to build stronger bridges that could span wider rivers and were large enough to transport equipment and materials using wagons and carts. As a consequence, Roman cities were able to grow on both sides of the river. The second development was an improved system for moving fresh water. Specifically, the Romans built structures called aqueducts, open waterways that carried water from high mountains to urban areas. These aqueducts transported large amounts of water over long distances, and as a result, people gained access to clean water for drinking and bathing without needing to live near a river, which allowed them to settle in new locations. Well, that's the end of our speaking section. I hope this video was helpful and gave you a better understanding of what to expect. Feel free to share your answers to these questions in the comments below. This way, you can also learn from each other. And if you've already taken the test, please share your results in the comments as well. Your stories are always inspiring, and they're a great way for us to connect. Good luck to all of you, and remember, you are more ready than you think. Bye-bye.